Okay, folks, I'm going to do a little catch up on what I've done already. I've got the final finish on the bullnose wrap done, which took some doing to get the layout proper so I can do it in one shot rather than having a couple of pieces. So what I did, I had the riser material brought in taller than what I needed so I can custom rip, not custom rip, but for, just in case there was a little variance or so from what I measured to what I actually had to work with, which happened because I had to add the blocks to change the height of all the risers by that 1/16 of an inch. I brought the material in at 8 inches so I could rip it down to 7 1/4 or whatever that number ended up needing to be. So with the riser here at the bottom though, because it doesn't have, it only has to meet the floor, it doesn't have to go down behind another tread. This allowed me to make a rip off of it about 2 inches tall. And that gave me a piece of scrap that I needed to work with to make sure that all the cuts were in the right spot to make this wrap here. And to start even with that, before I got that 2-inch fall off, that's the scrap that comes off the 8-inch piece. I had a piece of scrap 1/8-inch oak that was in here on the job, and it seemed to be handy. And it's nice and flexible, and it's actually, can bend a pretty tight radius. So what I did was just take this and mimic what the bullnose was going to do. And I went ahead and wrapped it on around her, and I got my approximate length. Now, when this was being put in place, it was at the surface of the back of the tread, back of the riser, that is. And with the riser being 3/4 of an inch thick, it was actually going to be longer because the inside radius is always longer than the outside radius. So when I set this in place, I first made sure I added some length to it to have something to play with, so to speak, because I knew it was going to be eventually longer. And what I was able to do was to mark where the radius started at here and where it finished off over here. That way, I was able to take those marks and with the leftover piece of material that I had to come off of the riser piece, this was like this over top of, what I was able to do was take those marks off of this piece and transfer it to the scrap piece. And so I was able to mark where the radius started and where it finished. And then with that, I was able to use this as a test piece, real time, which would actually let me do that curve so that when I put it in place, that told me that it needed to be, I'll just say this long. And I had to do some adjustment because I did cut it long, and I wanted to make sure that by the time it got put into place here up against the skirt board location and made its wrap, that it would touch this skirt board over here properly as well. So with all this information, now I have my actual length of what I need for my piece of riser board, bullnose riser. And then I went ahead and made all my curves on this to where I can get that in place. So that's where I'm at now. Next thing will be to do is to set the first tread, which is made long because, well, it's better always to have it too long than too short for obvious reasons, because I can always cut it shorter, but I can't make it longer. So it's a few inches longer than what I need, but I got to get this set in place first because this cut down here at the bottom of these skirt boards is all cut long so that I can get this in place and make this level cut, make this plumb cut after this is all done. That way, when this is set and this is not cut properly to get the right level, it's too high right now because it was made to set down there to be exactly where it needs to be at there. So obviously I got to at least cut, and I'm going to mark that actually right. No, I can't do that right now. It's not the right length. I'll scribe across the top of this once I cut this off at the right length. That way this will meet that. And then I can scribe it and make that cut proper. And then that way it'll just set on in there and, well, finish the way it's supposed to. Anyway, we'll move on with that. Okay, again, it's long, and I know I need about 1.1 inches of overhang on this end here, where I actually starting with 5 1/4. So that means I can start with a 4-inch cutoff this end right off the bat. And that'll leave me 1.25 inches of overhang there, which I'm shooting for about 1.8 inches on the fronts and on the sides. Okay, that should have it. And then I already, as I showed you in an earlier shot, that I actually have the newel post already laid out right here on the top of this. And that's where these cuts were governed by. But to make sure it fits absolutely tight, I'm going to cut this hole a little bit smaller than these right here. Then I'm going to take a flush cutting router bit on my router and set that inside the hole and let the bearing guide go against these cuts inside this pocket that are cut into the rough material underneath the finished tread. And that way the bearing guide and the cutter, the way it's fashioned, the way it's made, will allow this cutout to be dead exact over top of this, which will hopefully be right in line with these cuts here. But this is more important now to be exact here. And I can still actually give a little bit of fine tuning on this should something be off a little bit, but I don't expect it to be, because again, everything is based on this. So if I keep this dead centered over top of the riser down here, everything should fall into place. But I always build in that little bit of wiggle room should it need it. I mean, whether it's a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch, it all matters when you're dealing with tolerances like this to make this newel post rock solid. So I'm going to cut it, but I'm not going to take the full 4 because, well, I just don't want to wind up making that mistake with this very expensive piece of material here. All right, this is what I got. I got the tread cut to pretty much my final length. I got the hole roughed in here, where it's going to go approximately over top of the one that's in the rough carriages over here. And again, it's cut rough. It's cut smaller than that one over there, so I can take a flush cutting bit on the inside and finish this up true to its size, matching the one down below. So this is still another dry fit. Still a while before it goes in, but I see that my holes are right where they need to be at. Get my overhang that's accurate. I still have yet to set the riser board. I still have yet to set the skirt board over here. And that's leaning up against the wall, ready to go in. Should have its final cuts. But I'm getting my overhang even all the way around. And I could set this temporarily with a nail, but might not do that just yet, because I just want to see how all this goes together still. So, there you go. That almost looks like it belongs there. Get the overhangs back to where they should be. Make sure that's tight. That's tight and right. Actually, it needs to go. Good. Very good. So now I can set my long points. Yeah, this worked out. Thank you, Lord. And I could still cut it off another 1/8 of an inch if I wanted to, and I might do that still. Let's just see how this all plays through. I might just leave that. All right, well, I've had a couple of hours setback. I had a few things go wrong with me, not horribly wrong, but I had to take some time to correct it. So I have about a 3-hour break between takes. So anyway, I had to stop what I was doing upstairs at the top of the stairs, but I'm still able to carry on down here at the bulldozer. I wanted to do that up there and work backwards, so I'm not working over top of what I have. But between solid fastenings and glue, I'll be able to work over top of this as I go from the bottom up. So this is where we're starting at right here. I'll finish this off. This is only set loose while I was working over top of that. I've managed to get a little done off camera, so I just wanted to get back into it again to show you the process that I've been doing. It's pretty much all set up, ready to go for finishing off. I put all the risers on, the riser boards, to the rest of the treads already. And actually, I'm going to give you a close-up of what that looks like up there, how the treads go, how they form together, and where I've been putting the glue at and such, because all this is a glued assembly. So let me go ahead and turn this camera around. And I got these already set up to where let me get that a little bit more plumb. Anyway, but those are all set up and ready to go for paint. Everything's glued together. Scotia mold's on underneath at the bottom. And the skirt boards, panel moldings, returns, reveals. This is again, well, you see me working on this earlier, but I primed all that just to make sure that everything looks like it blended in together. And the primer didn't get in all the spots, but anyway, it's been sanded down. Everything's flush filled. And I see I got a hairline crack or so here, but not a big deal. That's less for the painters to get into and just to make sure that I had everything done that needed to be done. And here's the shims. I'm going to put this off to the side a little bit, but you can see the shims now where I added it. And that's some of the shims in the middle range. I used those 4 hash marks on the sides just to identify each of their various thicknesses so I could keep track of them, because things on construction sites like to get discombobulated and things go wrong and things get misplaced. But there's the next level of shims, and you can see up there I got the other shims there and at the top, so that way when the last treads come in, I don't have that big difference at the last top step up there. I've gotten the ends grooved, so the T and G portion of the treads, let me see if I can get that, but you can see the T and G part right there. It's a groove that passes through and it fits into that groove of the step. This tread's ready to set in place. So I'm not going to be able to do it with one hand. So I'm going to go ahead and put the camera back down on the floor again. And I got that one tread that I had on hand already cut, scribed, ready to go in, and it will have I have the glue ready to go down. Get the dried end off. And polyurethane based glue on top of the shims, which have also been glued with polyurethane glue. A little line across the top of the riser board, which has been cut fresh, so it's all raw wood there. That the glue will take to very, very nicely. And in the groove, since the groove is cut so tight, well, it's a nice slip fit. I won't call it tight, but it is a nice slip fit. That's going to get a regular wood glue in the groove, and that will help that become one continuous piece. And set that in place and drive it in, and that's pretty much where it needs to go. Got to come down a little bit. Use a rubber side of the handle to do that, and pilot some holes. Since this is white oak, this is very, very tough to nail to. And again, like I mentioned before, I could use a nail gun that might push the nails in through, but if those nails decide to not go into that white oak, it won't be pretty trying to get the bent nail out. So I just go ahead and get this thing nailed in by hand. Probably hardly anybody does that nowadays, but some places are still worthwhile doing it. And nail set, get them down below the surface so they'll take some filler so they can take a sanding or two before the nail heads burn through. Okay, ready for the next one. I have enough nails in it to draw it down tight to keep from being dislocated by my movements on top of it. And between that polyurethane glue and the wood glue that I have in the T&G, stairs are going nowhere. Okay, well, that would fit nice, but surprisingly, it's growing again. I got a little gap, and I have a way to fix that. That is much, much better. What I had, if you can see that from here, I actually had this return molding here tight on the end, and I'd actually cut it too short. I'll go ahead and bring the camera up here again and show you, because what I had was this edge here. That edge here was dead tight, and over here I had the slightest gap. It was about that big. Hopefully I got the camera angle right. And this is still loose. It's in the groove a little bit. But what I did was, you can see it from here. I'm going to turn this camera around. What I'm shooting here. You can see I made the slightest notch right there of 1/8 of an inch, actually less than 1/8 of an inch. So it would let that piece go over that way, that extra 1/8 of an inch, to take this space here that I had and make that space go away, which now it's like really gorgeous. So anyway, that was a fix I did for that. Should have done it on another one because I have a slightly bigger gap than what I like looking at, but it's not terrible. That's actually the one right there, but it's not terrible. But it's not what I wanted to see happen, but anyway. But that's what I got. I always try to cut them a little long. That way, when this work is in and out and got some movement, that way I can scribe it. I got about 1/8 of an inch long right there. And by the time I scribe this, that should be about exactly where it needs to be. And it really doesn't matter whether it's old work like this, even though this is a relatively new build. Between the way the drywall goes and the framing goes, that skirt board is not perfectly plumb in all places. And because of that, it goes in and out, and it makes the edges that are not perfectly square everywhere. You'd like to think that they are, but they are not. Chips out the way. That's not a bad fit at all. Not bad at all. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this one up. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Arthritis is flaring up. Tried that last night. It really smarts. At least I guess it is. I don't wish anything bad on myself like that, but if that's the way the good Lord will have it be, then so be it. I'll deal with it. About 3/16 I can cut off, so I'm going to give you a notch or two because I've got some wiring here that I just assume not get into, but I'm hoping that newel post is going to cover that up. I can also confirm that as well. Now, for what it's worth, this one I screwed up on also. I got it scribed for a finished length. I got to cut it off a little bit, but this is the first one that I cut yesterday. And for whatever reason, I read my tape wrong. It was 41 3/4, which pretty much all of them are. For some reason, I cut these a 1/2 inch too short. So because I don't have no spare parts, I glued the piece back on that I cut off. And I've done end grain gluing before, and I know it's not recommended, but I've had reason to take those apart before. And when it's glued well, it hangs in like a son of a gun. Anyway, I'm going to show you the joint because I was hoping it wasn't going to show up, and it's actually nearly stinking invisible. There's a pencil line that I drew. That's the 1/8 of an inch off. And the only place where you can see that, there's a cut there at the back. There it is on the back side. That's the back edge. That's the face edge. And that's a forward edge. Now, the only thing it was where the blade entered the wood, the blade had a little bit of a wiggle, and it straightened up once it started into the cut. Evidently, my blade's got some miles on it, and I didn't like that, but alrighty. I've gotten the last tread set. It went pretty good, I gotta say. Tickled with how it worked out. The blocks that I added on top of the carriages, the rough carriages, to bump them up, that graduated amount worked out pretty good at the top. It isn't perfect, but I'll tell you what, it was going to be a severe trip hazard if I hadn't done that. But I did raise them up 11/16 of an inch. Still about a 1/4 of an inch difference at the top, but that is within code. Anyway, yeah, code allows 3/8 of an inch difference from the greatest to the smallest. It can't be 3/8 difference, one smaller anyway. You can't graduate 7 inches down to 6 inches by changing each one 3/8 of an inch. It has to be between 6 3/8 and 6 3/4, or 7 3/8 and 7 3/4. That's it. But anyway, that is ready to go. I've cut a lot of the Scotia mold ready to go in place. I have a lot of it set as of yesterday from the lower half because I wanted to catch up if there's any ooze out of that polyurethane glue. That way I could keep that from having to be a cleanup job because it's tough stuff to do, especially on the inside corner up in here where, well, that's where I got it bedded in glue at the riser. Again, it's raw wood up there, raw wood underneath, and it's going to be a tough joint. But if I get glue ooze out, it's going to be even tougher. And I did spot it already that I got a couple of places up here on the upper runs. Here's one of the first ones where I have a little bit of ooze out, but that wipes off with the finger fairly easy. I'm going to get that over here. Anyway, but the Scotia mold will bed itself in those as long as there isn't too much there and winds up squeezing out into where the clear finish has got to go at the top because all this is going to be coated in clear. And I have enough nails to do, I think, at least a number of these. Everything's good there. That feels great. These are 18 gauge by 1.25 brads, shooting up through the 1.25-inch thick tread at an angle. So they got plenty of bite. I could probably use 1-inch nails. Just simply see no need to change them out, but I could have done it. And 1 inch would have worked because I'm only going through about 3/8 of an inch of material here when I'm going up at that angle. And that would get 5/8 into the wood, which white oak, that tough stuff that it is, that would hold it all day. Get this stuff downstairs because this part is done. I'll need this for to set the newel post in at the bottom. I'm going to cut the side pieces for the Scotia, and I'll come back to that. I got the newel post in place now, and I used that router bit like I was talking about, and I'll show you what I got. The opening was pretty rough when I cut it with a jigsaw, but that was the whole intent of just roughing it out to make sure I had it relatively in a close spot where it needed to be at. But this is a flush cutting router bit with a bearing on the top. And with that hole that I cut roughly, I was able to take and send it down through the pocket where the newel post is at. I'll show you over here. Now, I don't know if I had a good shot of the other one, but that's the pocket now after I roughed it out the rest of the way with the flush cutting bit. Here's my material that I have down inside there. It's actually the structure. That's just part of the dressing, so to speak. And yes, it's rough there, but they want a plinth around the bottom of this, so I took advantage of that to make it so I didn't have to cut that so critically. And on top of that, I would have cut it differently also if that was the case. So I took advantage of a situation because I knew it was going to get dressed up with other material. There you go. Now you can see the marks. But anyway, the newel post drops in down there really good. I got my good face showing the direction that I want. And it drops down in that last pocket, just like that. Got the depth marked where it's supposed to finish at, and there it is. And it has a little bit of wiggle room, but I can shim that gap around the perimeter and get that to be spot on plumb. I've already checked it as well within reason. It's a lot taller than what I was expecting it to be. But that's what I'm going to check out right now. I got a screw set at 36 inches where code says 34 to 38 for the height of the handrail above the nosings. Not here, not there, above the nosing. So I'm going to set a string line up there. and run it down to here to get that same dimension all the way through the whole run of the stairs of 36 inches. If I can cut it down, I want to get this cut down as low as possible without getting past what code requires of the minimum of 34. So, because this post is like really tall. As soon as you walk in here to the door, that will be the first thing that you see. There's the door right there. Yeah, as soon as you walk in, that newel post is right there. And I want to get it down at least this high if I can, by cutting it off at the bottom and dropping the whole thing down into the floor a little deeper. So that's the plan. I got my string line. I'm going to go on up there and tie that off. And I'm going to let the picture run for a while. Okay, from this nose, it's actually at 27 3/4. So if I can get that down to 27 3/4, that's my 36-inch plumb from the nosings. 27 3/4. And I'm at 30 right now, so I got to drop it down a few inches, and that's good. I got to drop it down about 3 inches. And it's all trial and error. Until I get 27 and I'm at 27.5 now, so I'm really close. It's 26 3/4. I'm going to put a little tick mark, just so I can keep track of where it was. I didn't do that the last time. Let's see where that's at. I don't really have to get it dead on right now, but you'll see what my next step is. And I've got 26 3/7/16 right now. And my fixture that's going to go on up is here. So that's actually a beautiful thing. That says that I can actually lower this post down, if I see that right, 4 1/4 inches. So I can cut 4 1/4 inches off this bottom, and that'll put the top of this right with that string line at 36. And if I wanted to push it, I could take it down to 35 if that still looks too obnoxiously high. But I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 1/4 inches off of this, and then set this all back up again and see what this means. And I'm going to mark this location and simply raise it from there 4 1/4 inches. So I have my new mark already in place. And these are all sand off, it's just pencil marks. See, that's better already. I'm going to give a new depth mark and double check that, because that number is 7 1/4, 7 1/4 according to the pocket. Actually, it's 4 1/2 from the old one, 7 1/4 on the new one. What's not to like? Okay, good. So, and it's down to that mark already. Good. The only other thing that I could do that would be of benefit would be to shim that level, because when this thing leans back and forth, that changes that string line, or the handrail will actually get lower when it pulls this way. So I'm going to shim it plumb. I'm done with this. This served its purpose very, very well. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around. See, that looks already better. It's not like right at your nose where it was when I first had it set up. So I'm tickled about that development. That's cool. Okay. Now, if that's on the mark like I think it is, see, we're at our 27 3/8. Always double check. And 27 3/8 it is. So that's following the plane of the steps perfectly. So if I'm measuring 36 inches plumb up there, I should be measuring 36 inches plumb down here as well. And I want to just confirm that. Now I might be off 1/4 of an inch or so because I've done some things up there, like using a screw, and I've got to work around the head of the screw. But I'm putting that up there and I'm marking the level right where the string intersects with that edge of the level. So that's my plumb line. That's a level made. And I got 34 1/4 of all things. That's cool. It's code. Now let's see where the actual fitting plays into all of this with that. And actually that's about another inch higher. And that's cool. That'll put it up closer. It's about 1/2 of an inch higher. So I'm going to go ahead and raise that. Get that eyeball in plane and take that new number. I got 27 7/8 right there. I'll also confirm that for plumb. And I got 27.5 here. Again, when that end goes up an inch, this end will go up a little bit in relationship to it. So I can still actually cut this down a little bit, and it'll be 36 that I can see. So let's see what this says. I did it down there. Let's do it right here. All right, that is plumb right there. And check that for length. I'm at 35 1/4. So I can actually drop down. I'm going to see what's up there because that now should read the exact same thing as this when it's plumb. So there's my mark. There's the edge of the nosing. Get some way to stabilize this so I'm not so wiggly. And that's within 1/8 of an inch of that line that I put there. So that actually wound up being 35 in a bit. So, you know, I'm good with that. I'm going to leave that there. That's a good grab height right there. So I like that. I like that a lot. So that's going to get anchored. And now I'm going to ask the homeowner how tall they want that plinth. And the plinth will be the added piece that's going around the bottom of the newel post. Do I have that in my shot well enough? So these are the pieces that I'm going to use to make the plinth. There's just 5.5 inch piece wide. That's a 3.5 inch square newel post. And by the time I miter these ends and get them angled back, I'll have a little bit of fall off on either side. And I'll be able to get a nice clean outside corner to make it look like a monolithic block around the outside perimeter. And it's tall enough to cut this any height that I want. I only got about 1 inch of spare, but I like the rule of thirds, to where if this is 15 inches tall, then my plinth block will be either 5 inches tall or 10 inches tall. And that's what I'm going to ask her, what her opinion of. But before I mounted it, right now it's just a square piece of material. Square on both ends, square all edges. I'm going to take this router bit with this oversized bearing, and this is what I made the Scotia mold with, at least the returns. I had the Scotia mold made by others, but on my returns, this is what I cut the returns for. I had to, this is one that's left over from the returns on the skirt boards. But anyway, this router bit right here with its blade, that makes that cut, that matches that profile very nicely. So that's just for the Scotia mold. Now I wanted to reuse that same detail. Let me get it the right way. I wanted to reuse the same detail on the top of this. Now, I'm not a big fan of adding the molding. Yeah, some of you might say just go ahead and add it onto the top, but I'm not one to do that. I just don't see that around the newel post. Could, but I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to take this router bit here again that I've already used one other time beforehand, and I'm just going to, because that's a feature that's already on the stairs, I'm going to run this down this edge and make that same profile cut into this one piece. So it's already part of that plinth block, but so that way when I miter it, that router piece, that router edge will show all the way around the perimeter, and that's what I'm going to do with this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take my string line down and take this newel post out. I'm happy again where it's at. It would be nice if it was still a little bit lower, but it's a lot lower than what it was. And I don't want to push code anymore. I mean, I could take another inch off of it and still be code, but I don't see that making that much of an impact here. So I'm going to leave it at that and get this newel post mounted in plumb, rock solid, shimmed around, glued in so it can set overnight so I can come back tomorrow and do what I need to do with it to get my balusters drilled in and, well, to get as far as I can. I don't have the handrail yet. I had to reject the one handrail that came in. They put a splice in at the top, and I asked if that was the way it was supposed to be, and even the supplier agreed it's not supposed to be that way. I'm getting another one in next week, so I'm going to have a small hiatus on this until that handrail gets in, but I can at least get this all prepped out good and far until it's just the handrail to do and cutting the balusters in. All right, I've got the newel post firmly anchored. It's really solid right now. Why is it acting like it's moving? Oh, son of a gun. Yeah, I had this thing like a rock before. I have to look at that a little closer then. But anyway, it will be when it's done, or at least until when the glue dries. But anyway, what I got here is I got my baluster shoes. These are going to be the metal black balusters, and these are going to be at the base. You've probably seen them somewhere around, but it's a little, they call it a shoe. It's got an Allen set screw in the end of it. And these will be placed on top of the treads, but not until the treads get all finished off with clear sealer and the clear finishes on top of that. So anyway, this is where I base everything on. I want this edge here to line up with the face of the riser, so the baluster set back a little bit from the edge of the tread nosings by that dimension plus the face of the riser. So that's how I base it all out. Anyway, what it came down to is that this stick here is the first notch right there is for the first baluster at the tread. And this is pretty much where that notch is derived from. That's my overall. And that's flush with that right there. And that's the first notch for the first baluster, another one for each baluster thereafter. And I have to get 3 in, because otherwise if I put in 2, that space would be much bigger than 4 inches, or 4 inches between the balusters is what's allowable by code, or no more than 4 inches between the balusters. So I'm going to use this as a gauge that'll bump up against the riser. And that'll give me a location for each of the balusters on each tread. And the baluster from the one at the back edge of the riser, back edge of the tread near the riser, when I come on up to the next set of, next tread, that distance should be the same as this one. Anyway, we'll see how that goes, because I'm going to verify it before I drill the first hole. Okay, now with that, I can actually now take my level, that little bitty one, wherever it's at. I'll use the big one. It's a little more awkward, but I could actually use a square, but still, level's more accurate. And my first mark's down here. And when I get that, I got a shy 3 3/8 between centers. That's 10 inches divided by 3. So I should have between that mark there at the top and this mark down here, by the time I lean this in the plumb, that should be dead plumb. And bingo right there. And that's looking gorgeous on that. So my stick that I laid out is accurate. So now all these treads being the same, which they are, that's been confirmed. Now I can just go ahead and take my stick with its notches and put the pencil. There you go. That's the newel post all glued in. Again, all that spooge, that polyurethane is going to swell up out of that joint where it's practically started already. But that'll lock it in the rest of the way. I have all of the newel post on the brain. I got all the balusters laid out where they're going to take and go at, and that's all the way through the whole run. So those are all laid out, and there's going to be a couple of them down here on this level too. There might be 2, there might be 1, pardon the angle, that was kind of weird. Anyway, but I got one there that's going to be drilled into the turnout that's up top, and but anyway, that's ready to go. I might come back here tomorrow and drill those. It's no big hurry one way or the other, so we'll just see how this goes. Till later. All right, I'm down here finishing off the last details of this here paneling that I put on well before the stairs got involved, because that's the way that needed to work out. So now I'm just detailing some last issues here where I cut this base to tie in around this corner here, because typically if there's a wall through here, this skirt board will just carry on through, and Lord willing tie into the base and just simply go on across the way across to, whether it's a door or to a corner or however the thing. Let me adjust this a little bit. There you go. Anyway, this is the corner I'm talking about. The base would typically come on down through here and tie into a base detail that's out here. But since we have a door here, I got to make a transition around the corner. And in order to terminate this, I have to do a 45 miter, which I have here already. But I also have this reveal here on this door jamb. It's just a drywall wrapped opening. But this is where I added the casing. Quarter of an inch. This is just a little fancy filler that kept a lot of caulk, you know, that little triangular shaped thing right there. And when that's all done, that'll make a clean transition. I still have to cut this little piece to its final height, but this level transition when it goes in, and I'm going to glue it to even the primed wood. It's better than nothing. I got a couple of brads that I'm going to put in there. They're actually headless pins, and I'm going to glue it to the wall too. Going to need all the help we can get. By the time I glue it to the piece that's going to be on the wall, not the wall, this piece, it's going to be glued to this one as well. So I got my headless pinner here, 3/4 inch pins. I got to hold that just right, otherwise it's all for naught. I'm going to put one pin in there. Just see if I got it right. And that looks really good. I can push that in and get that joint flush. That way the painter can work that out. And I'm going to let that one nail hold it for now, because now I can mark this piece for length. And I made it what wound up being extra long, so I'm going to give that a cut. And if I got it right, and if it's the right height, I'll go ahead and ease this edge off at the top so it matches all the other radiuses that are inherent with the base material, skirt material. And actually that turned out pretty good on height, so thank you Lord for that. Anyway, yep, I'll go ahead and get this eased off a little bit at the top to match that. Make sure I'm doing it right. Okay, now, run a line of glue. Curious. It looks like a microphone's dead. Maybe not. Maybe it picked up on the phone. Maybe it's got the phone mic rather than my remote mic. But we'll see. I'll get this thing pinned in there. Got some glue ooze out, which is always good. You didn't see that. I gotta just ease that corner off a little bit between a little caulk and the painter and what we have there. That'll finish out very, very nicely. So what I'm going to do is move on next with the plinth. Anyway, so I made a level turn. That's what I was waving my hand around the last go around. I made a level turn. That's what I call a level transition, and mitered that. And now I have that piece that has this dimension here and that dimension there. That's how I like to break up the reveals whenever I have to do that. I could have ran this out 3/4 this material thickness also, but then that would have left this edge here sticking out beyond the face of this right here. And with the baseboard coming around, I'm just going to use this piece here as a mimic. When this base comes around now, this is a piece of 3/4, but it's also the same height as a base, 7 1/4 inches tall. So that way, when they put a miter on that corner, this line up this miter with that corner, which is the typical way they would turn any corner anyway, then this little piece will simply return back to there, and all this is still behind the surface. Again, it's just a detail that I chose to. And but anyway, I think that'll just give a lot cleaner look for to terminate all this business going around this corner here. I think I was rather busy myself otherwise, but it helped get past some issues. So anyway, that's how that got resolved. And that's where this is at right now. This is what the homeowner wanted. I had her take a peek at it, and this is what she's interested in. Now, this didn't come with its own little trials and tribulations also. The piece that's missing in the back, I made a sample out of these pieces when they were longer, and the sample had a different profile, and but it was close to the other one, but of all things, it was not the same. So here's a profile that I had, and you can see it's actually that flat, this flat here compared to that flat there is much, this one's much bigger, or at least enough to make a difference. Before I added these pieces on, I added these pieces back on so I could take a router and pass across here again, because if I'd have left this thing mitered like that, as soon as a router bit would have passed over top of this, it would have not met, it would have messed up the profile. If anybody's handled a router and not had a proper bearing surface to work with, it'll just really chew things up more than what it needs to be. But anyway, this is pre-cut the length. I just got to make this cut, I'm going to call it deeper, just to make this flat here the same as that flat. Then I'll just do what I did before. I'll take the table saw and cut these back off again, because these are now sacrificial pieces. And then I'll have a piece that's been now remodified, if you want to call it that, that matches these pieces right here, the ones that are already on. And then I can finally get this one back on. And that's been that trial and tribulation. Now, as I mentioned, I've already gotten all the holes laid out, and I started punching some of the holes, and I figured I would start seeing how the balusters acted, because this level turn, this easement, I'm not really happy with what they're doing for pins nowadays over tops of newel posts now, very small. Anyway, I got it cut to make that transition going up the slope of the handrail. It's set at 35 inches. to this part right here. That's 35 inches from the nosings down below. So we're within code by the 1 inch, and it can be as short as 34 even or 38 even in height. So it has got 4-inch variance, and I'm at the 35-inch mark. So when I put this together, get this back down on her all the way. When I put this together, and when I started standing up the baluster for down here at the bottom, I found out that I was too short by about every bit of a half of an inch just to get it to engage with the bottom of that level turn. So that was rather disappointing. So what I had to do was break out my stretcher. And what I did was add a piece on the end. Get that so you can see. You can see where the shoulder is. I'll get one and compare it to the other one. You can see that once the thing gets in focus, you can see where the old shoulder is because I covered up the round pin. I added a piece about 1.25 inches in length, and you can see the old end of it. I think I can get a shot up in there. I'm going to get focused again. It's not going to want to focus on that. Anyway, it's up in there, so I stretched it by about 1/2 inch. But in order to get this to act right, that meant I had to cut a square hole down there and to hide the joint where the two pieces are joined together. Fortunately, the shoe will cover that up. Now watch that joint disappear once it goes down inside there. There you go. Drops right down in there. And then when this goes up to the bottom, I have it so it's meeting that because there's nothing to work with. If I brought it up any higher, the joint would be visible there. And if I brought it any lower, then there will be a gap where that meets the bottom of the level turnout. So right now, I think I got this within level. It's still just a skosh high, not terrible. And I'd rather have it a skosh high because I can always recut it again. But the idea is that now I don't have still enough length to bury this thing up inside that pocket that I had originally cut. So, and there's my other one for the next one back. And that all works out great because down here we're jumping up another 7 3/4 inch, and that's plenty long. I also have those already cut. But what I needed to do was make a little piece, this wonderful little gem. And this is out of the white oak, so it's going to be quite strong. I had to put a little groove on one side and put a shoulder on it because it has to meet on the inside. I'm going to put that there. And this is the hole. And this is the hole that it's supposed to go into. But this is going to go in its place. So that's what it's going to do when it's finally set. I'll glue that in place eventually once I get the other piece of handrail in. But what that's going to do, that little notch that I have, because this has a punch part in it right there, that wasn't going to let that go in unless I drilled it and did all kinds of nasty stuff. But that groove is letting that go right on in there now. So with everything in place, that's in there at the bottom, and that's meeting the handrail at the top with that square peg in place, and it's more or less being very well supported now. And it's also not going to come out, at least unless somebody takes a hammer to it. So that's how I was able to stretch these balusters that 1/2 inch that I needed, and worked out. I'm just glad I did. It took me about 3 hours to do all this to sort it out, but it made something work that I had no other alternative to do. So that's what I have for now. I have my half newel up there ready to go, but I'm not going to be able to cut that until I got the gooseneck riser that finishes off that run of handrail. And again, that'll be another day. That's it for now. Okay, folks, this is a little narrative on everything that I've done so far to date. I'm moving the tools out temporarily until the handrail shows up. But anyway, it seems like my videos that I was doing while the work was being done, I lost a lot of audio because I was working with a remote battery pack that didn't have that long of a lifespan. But anyway, this is a little overview on everything I've gotten done. I've got I've got the joints filled for the most part in the paneling. That's all down to a very thin skim. Some of it I had some paint to touch up, just not touch up, but just hit it to make sure that the finish that I was giving was a flush surface all the way across where the joints are. Because some of the plywood was only 4 foot wide, but yet I had a 6 foot wide panel. As you can see, there's a 2 foot panel there, and that joint there is broke on the stud, so I could fasten it to the stud there. This this archway took a lot more time than what I had thought. I had to go around a different process than what I had originally figured, which anyway, it just cost more time, but I believe it gave a better product. Again, the joints are primed, so I could see that they are all finished off flush. I wanted to get that reveal, that margin around the jamb to the new material. I wanted to get that all even, which that turned out well. I did a little cheating at the top, that one right-hand side rail vertical. I graduated that a little bit wider at the top because, well, I had to start at a given dimension at the bottom, and I staged it out so I had more surface to nail onto. The other parts down here are glued together, so I didn't have to worry about that. I put them in as a unit. The stairs are all ready to receive their handrail, like I had mentioned before. That's waiting to show up. All the balusters are drilled. I have the easement already cut and ready to go up the angle that it needs to do. The plinth blocks that the homeowner wanted added around the bottom of the newel post here. I've got that added and done. I'm not crazy about the feature, but the pictures that she showed me and what I gave her is a world apart, because the picture she showed me was, well, it looked like somebody slapped a couple of 2x around it and colored it done, but I had to give us a little detail around the top just to give it some interest instead of just a square edge like her picture showed me. I told her what I was planning on doing and she approved it. All the holes are drilled, all ready to go. I just got to sand off the surface where the pencil marks are for my layout. And again, just to reiterate, by the time this handrail made its path, if I'd have left that bull nose the way it was, one, I would have had a section of drywall left open, and ideally the newel post would have been all the way out to this edge here farther, but that would have also put it so far away from this edge, I'm afraid that when somebody was coming either downstairs, they would actually, their hand would be all the way over here where the newel post could have been, but instead I moved it over here so it's an easier grab coming off from the top of the stairs going down. So that was the other reason why, besides the bull nose, it just seemed like the bull nose stuck out so far. But here's some of the other details up here. That's my Scotia mold that I put around the top, and that nosing there is cut off, ready to receive the newel post, the split newel at its location. So that's pretty much got this wrapped up. They're planning on putting some bookshelves on that wall eventually, and something all the way up to the ceiling. And I believe it's to mimic the paneling that I put, which I think would be a great way to tie in, because these sections here are 4 foot wide, that one and that one. That would make a great great shelf section on either side. And they had a fireplace in the center over on the other side, so that'd be a great frame around the fireplace too. Again, my opinion only. Anyway, there'll be more later once I get the handrail in, but I just wanted to give this little overview on what's happened so far. And I never told you about those panels up there. That's something that OSHA would have really called me on, the way I went about putting those panels up there. Ladders and walk boards and stuff like that, and no scaffolding. So anyway, it was fun. Quite nervous too. Anyway, till later. Thank you. Bye-bye.